But we find that RefComm conference to be quite unique in a number of ways. We're happy to be here because there's so many refiners all gathered up in one place, and we actually have access to a great number of them. The venue is open and inviting and friendly, and we kind of feel like a community here. And so when everybody kind of gets together, there's camaraderie, but there's also a lot of technical exchange of information. It's very unique in that way because a lot of other conferences, they tend to have a skewed number of vendors and not as many end users. So we really appreciate the fact that this has quite a bit more end users than maybe a lot of the other industry conferences. So it's been quite difficult, actually. The last few conferences, I believe, even with RefComm, have been online, and I presented on a couple of those occasions. And man, I'll tell you, it's virtually impossible to tell or gauge the responses that you get from everybody. Everybody's so quiet. Even when you ask a question, it takes a lot of times you don't get an answer, and you're wondering, who am I talking to? And the face-to-face, I've always been a big fan of that. You can't get around that. I was brought up in this industry by a couple of old guys, and I initially tried to convince them that maybe the digital way was the way to go. But in retrospect, I have to admit that when you're talking to someone and you're looking them in the eyes, you get so much more, communication across, even without saying a word. So it has been difficult to not have that. And now coming back together, I think because of that, we almost feel like this is one of the better conferences that we've been to in many, many years, even though there's a reduction in let's say the number of people that are here. It's not as big as some of the other conferences, but we're so hungry for it. It's lovely to be back together. What challenges lie ahead for the industry? So, of course, the environmental aspects that we're all having to deal with are extremely challenging. Some of the government edicts that are coming down and making us have to comply in certain ways, it's tough. And the end users are having to, let's say, lean on the vendors a lot more for their knowledge. We really actually appreciate that from the vendor side, but we see how challenging it is from the end user side, right? They're losing a lot of their older personnel. A lot of people are retiring. A lot of people are choosing not to go back into the workforce, and so they're leaning on us. And in some ways, you think, well, that's a loss of technical knowledge out there that I don't know how they can replace that. But when you have a good vendor, sometimes maybe that's feasible in some way. So there you go. There's a new generation coming through, and they're not as well versed. And so it's beholden on the vendors in some cases and some of the old guard to train these guys. And so we find a lot more opportunity where the younger engineers and technical people are actually hungry for this knowledge. And so we do find that interestingly enough, that they appreciate us coming to their facilities and doing trainings for them. They're more savvy. So the trainings have to be less of a sales pitch and more of a technical information sort of gathering, sort of a meeting. And when you can make that transition and make them happy to have learned something, like for example, continuing education credits is something we offer when we do a training session on a particular subject, right? They really appreciate that because they can keep up their professional engineering certifications as a result of the trainings that we provide them. So works out.
That's great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.